The stars had never seemed so cold. Admiral Daniel Carter stood on the bridge of the Resolute, Earth's greatest warship, and watched the alien fleet emerge from the jump gate. There were hundreds of them. Their ships were beautiful in a terrible way, all smooth curves and glowing engines, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. He had served in the fleet for 30 years. He had seen pirates and rebels and the worst that humans could do to each other, but he had never seen anything like this. "Sir," said his communications officer, a young woman named Kelly, "they're hailing us." Daniel took a deep breath, put it through. The flickered and changed. The face that appeared was not human. It was made of living crystal, shifting and reforming as it spoke. Its voice was like wind through broken glass. "I am voice of the hegemony of. I speak for the Galactic Concordat and its 200-member civilizations. You will listen." Daniel said nothing. He simply waited. "The species known as humanity has violated the laws of galactic harmony. You have refused to share your communication technology. You have expanded without permission. You have acted as though you matter." The crystal face showed something that might have been discussed. "You do not matter. You are children playing with fire in the dark, and children must be taught their place." The message continued. Daniel felt his hands grow cold as he listened. Earth and all human colonies would surrender their military forces. All weapons would be destroyed. All humans would submit to something called cultural rehabilitation. They had 72 hours to comply. "If you refuse," said, "you will be corrected. 18 younger species have been corrected in the past 1,000 years. None of them resisted for more than a single day. Their world still exists. Their people still live, but they have learned the wisdom of obedience. You will learn it too." The screen went dark. Daniel stared at the empty space where the alien's face had been. His mind raced through possibilities, strategies, anything that might help. The math was simple and terrible. The Concordat had 300 ships for every one of humanity's vessels. There was no way to win. But there might be a way to make them bleed. He turned to Kelly. "Send everything we recorded to Earth Command. Priority Alpha. The Secretary General needs to see this now." 4 hours later, Laura Mitchell sat in the great chamber of United Earth Command and watched the same message. Around her sat the leaders of humanity's 12 colony worlds, their faces grim and pale. Laura was 60 years old. She had gray hair and tired eyes and the weight of 8 billion lives on her shoulders. She had spent her career building peace, finding compromise, bringing people together. Now she faced an enemy that did not want peace. They wanted submission. The lights came back on. No one spoke for a long moment. "Well," said Cole, the military chief, breaking the silence, "that's that then." "Is it?" Laura asked. Pulled up a holographic display. Ships and numbers filled the air between them. "Ma'am, I've run the calculations 100 times. If they attack with their full force, we last maybe 6 hours. Our fleet is good. Our people are brave. But we're talking about civilizations that have been building warships since before humans discovered fire. We can't win." "I didn't ask if we could win," Laura said quietly. "I asked if it's over." A woman at the far end of the table raised her hand. Doctor was small and soft-spoken, the kind of person you might pass on the street without noticing. She led the Advanced Weapons Research Division on Titan Station, and she had not spoken a word since the meeting began. "Secretary General said, 'May I show you something?'" Laura nodded, stood and walked to the display console. Her fingers moved quickly and the military projections disappeared. In their place was something else entirely: equations, diagrams, a device that looked like a small star caught in a cage of metal. "I call it Project Prometheus," said. "We've been working on it for 15 years in complete secrecy. It manipulates the fabric of space itself. With this, we can collapse their jump gates. We can cut their fleet off from reinforcements, from supplies, from retreat. We can turn their greatest strength into their greatest weakness." The room erupted in questions, demanded to know why he hadn't been told. The colonial governors argued about whether it would even work, but Laura stayed silent, studying the diagrams, thinking. Finally, she raised her hand. The room fell quiet. "Doctor," Laura said, "if we use this weapon, can we win?" His face was serious. "I don't know, but we can make them pay a price they've never paid before, and we can show the galaxy that humanity doesn't kneel." Laura closed her eyes. She thought about her on the colony world of New Geneva. She thought about the billions of people going about their lives, not yet knowing what was coming. She thought about all the generations that had fought and struggled and dreamed so that humanity could reach the stars. And she thought about those 18 species that had been corrected. What did that word even mean? What had been done to them? She opened her eyes. "Get me a channel to every human world," she said. "Every ship, every station, every person with a receiver. I'm going to speak." 20 minutes later, her face appeared on screens across human space. In homes and factories, on ships and colonies, people stopped what they were doing and listened. "My fellow humans," Laura began, "today we received a message from the Galactic Concordat. They have ordered us to surrender our ships, our weapons, and our freedom. They have given us 72 hours to decide." She paused, letting the words sink in. "I have decided." Her voice grew stronger now, filled with something that had been sleeping in humanity's heart since the first person looked up at the night sky and wondered. "We were born in fire. We crawled from the mud and reached for stars that told us we were too small, too young, too savage to join them. They were wrong then. They are wrong now. We did not come this far to bow. We did not survive ice ages and plagues and wars and the cold emptiness of space to kneel before anyone." Laura leaned forward, her eyes blazing. "Earth does not kneel. Not today, not ever. Prepare yourselves, my friends, the storm is coming, and we will meet it standing." Across the galaxy, the Concordat's surveillance systems recorded everything. The alien lords watched the small, gray-haired woman deliver her defiance, and they laughed. They had heard such speeches before, from a dozen other species. It always ended the same way. But deep in the listening posts of the hegemony, a few analysts noticed something strange. Humanity's military channels had suddenly gone dark. Their ship movements had become impossible to track. Something was happening in the shadows of the Sol system. Something the galaxy had never seen before. The countdown began. The red deserts of Mars stretched endlessly under a pale pink sky. Commander Torres stood at the edge of a massive crater and watched the ground begin to move. Sand fell away in great waterfalls. Metal gleamed beneath. And slowly, impossibly, ships began to rise from the depths where they had slept for 200 years. Had read about the sleeper fleet in history classes. Everyone had. They were relics of humanity's darkest age, the great civil war that had nearly destroyed the species before it ever reached the stars. When peace finally came, the surviving governments had buried the most terrible weapons ever made, hoping they would never be needed again. Now they were needed. "How many?" asked the engineer beside him. 4,000 combat vessels, sir. Another 6,000 support ships, all automated, all armed with weapons that would make the Concordat's commanders very uncomfortable. Watched as the ancient warships shook off centuries of dust. They were ugly things, brutal and angular, built for one purpose only. They had no art in their design, no grace. They were hammers made to break worlds. "Wake them all," said, "and pray they still remember how to fight." Far away, in the frozen depths of Saturn's rings, Admiral Daniel Carter directed the greatest shell game in human history. Ships vanished into clouds of ice crystals. Weapons platforms hid among tumbling asteroids. Entire battle groups slipped into the radiation belts of Jupiter, their signals lost in the giant planet's electromagnetic storms. The Concordat watched Earth's space with 1,000 eyes, but they were looking for what they expected to see: a fleet gathering for a desperate last stand, or ships fleeing toward the colonies. They did not see the scattered shadows moving through the dark places of the solar system. They did not understand that humanity had learned long ago how to hide, how to wait, how to strike from nowhere. On the bridge of the Resolute, Carter received word that the dispersal was complete. His fleet was invisible now, a ghost army waiting in the void. "Good," he said softly. "Now we wait for them to come to us." While soldiers prepared for war, one woman prepared for something far more dangerous. Gray had no uniform and no rank. She worked for an agency that did not officially exist, doing things that were never recorded. And now she was walking into the heart of the enemy. The Concordat's administrative hub was called the Nexus. It was a station the size of a small moon, floating in a system 3,000 light-years from Earth. Millions of aliens lived and worked there, managing the bureaucracy of galactic civilization. And buried somewhere in its data vaults was the truth about cultural rehabilitation. Its disguise was perfect. Her body had been temporarily modified to resemble a species called the small gray-skinned beings who served as clerks and messengers throughout Concordat space. She walked through crowded corridors, past beings of crystal and light and shadow, and no one looked twice at her. It took her 3 days to reach the restricted archives. 3 days of pretending to be something she wasn't, of speaking a language that felt like broken glass in her throat, of smiling at creatures who would kill her without hesitation if they knew what she was. But she made it. The files were protected by security systems older than human civilization. It didn't matter. Had been trained by the best hackers Earth had ever produced, and she carried tools that pushed the boundaries of what was technologically possible. She found what she was looking for in a database marked completed corrections. And then she wished she hadn't. The 18 species that had been corrected were not simply conquered, or they had been rewritten at the genetic level. Their capacity for aggression, for defiance, for independent thought had been stripped from their very DNA. They were peaceful now, yes, obedient, happy even in a hollow and empty way. But they were no longer themselves. Found records of what they had been before. They had been poets and warriors, their songs famous across the galaxy. Now they worked in factories, humming simple tunes, never wondering why their hearts felt so empty. They had been explorers, the first to map the outer rim. Now they stayed on their single world, terrified of the stars they had once loved. The files contained something else too. Plans. The Concordat had already designed the modifications for humanity. They would remove human creativity, human ambition, human fire. They would leave behind a species of workers and servants, useful and harmless, forever grateful for the peace imposed upon them. Everything. Then she sat in that dark archive for a long moment, struggling to breathe, fighting the urge to scream. When she finally moved again, she didn't just take intelligence. She left something behind. A virus hidden deep in the Concordat's targeting systems. A gift for the fleet that was coming to correct humanity. She was on a shuttle back to human space within the hour. The report reached Earth while the Concordat fleet was still gathering. Laura Mitchell read it in silence, her face growing paler with each page. When she finished, she called another meeting. This time there were no arguments about surrender, no debates about the cost of war. The leaders of humanity looked at what had been done to 18 other species and understood that there was no negotiation possible. There was no peace that would leave them whole. "They don't want to rule us," Laura said finally. "They want to erase us, to turn us into something that can't dream, can't hope, can't fight. They want to kill humanity while leaving human bodies walking around." Cole, the military chief, had tears in his eyes. He was a hard man, a veteran of a dozen battles, but some things were beyond bearing. "Then we make them pay," he said. "Every ship they lose, every soldier we kill, we make them remember that we were here, that we mattered." Doctor looked up from her calculations. "Prometheus is ready. But I need to warn you. If we use it wrong, if something goes badly, we might damage the jump gate network permanently. We might strand entire civilizations. We might change the galaxy forever. Laura thought about her again. She thought about them growing up without the spark that made them human, without curiosity, without hope. Do it, she said. Whatever it takes, whatever it costs, we will not be corrected. Across human space, the final preparations began. Ships loaded weapons. Soldiers said goodbye to families they might never see again. Children were moved to the deepest shelters on the most distant colony worlds. And in the space between Mars and Jupiter, Admiral Carter watched the sensors and waited for the storm. It came 2 days later. The Concordat Armada emerged from the jump gate like a flood of fire and steel. 10,000 capital ships, countless support vessels, more firepower in one place than humanity had possessed in its entire history. They came expecting surrender or slaughter. They had no idea what was waiting for them in the dark. Admiral Al stood on the command deck of the Endless Light, flagship of the Concordat Armada, and smiled. At least, his crystal face shifted into what passed for a smile among his kind. Before him lay the human solar system, 8 planets, 1 tiny sun, and a species that had dared to defy the will of the galaxy. It was almost amusing. He had corrected 3 civilizations in his career, and none of them had ever thought to resist. They had seen the fleet and known that resistance was death. But these humans had rejected the offer of peaceful surrender. They had made speeches about fire and standing tall. They had called themselves warriors. Al would teach them what the word really meant. Scan the system, he ordered. Find their fleet. His officers worked their instruments for several minutes. When they looked up, their crystal faces showed confusion. Admiral, one said, we cannot find them. Their military stations appear abandoned. Their defense platforms are powered down. Their ships have simply vanished. Al's smile faded, vanished. There are no significant energy signatures anywhere in the system. It is as if their entire military force has ceased to exist. For a moment, something cold moved through Al's thoughts. He had studied humanity before this mission. He knew they had fought each other for thousands of years, perfecting the art of war while his kind pursued harmony and order. He knew they were dangerous in ways that more civilized species could not understand. But then he dismissed his concerns. What did it matter if they hid? The Concordat had 10,000 ships. They could search every moon and asteroid in the system if necessary. Humanity's fleet would be found and destroyed. Advance toward the 3rd planet, he commanded. There, if they will not come to us, we will come to them. The great armada moved forward, crossing the void between stars and planets. They passed the outer gas giants without incident. They swept through the asteroid belt and found only rocks and silence. With every passing hour, Al grew more confident. The humans had fled. Their brave words were nothing but empty noise. Then they reached Jupiter. The giant planet hung in space like an ancient god, its storms raging across a face larger than some solar systems. The Concordat fleet began to pass around it, heading for the inner worlds. That was when the darkness came alive. Admiral Daniel Carter had waited for this moment for 3 days. He had watched the enemy fleet from the shadow of Jupiter's radiation belts, hidden where no sensors could find him. He had counted their ships, studied their formations, learned their patterns. Now he gave the order. All units attack. The human fleet emerged from nothing. Ships appeared from behind moons and out of radiation clouds, their weapons already firing. The first wave of kinetic accelerators launched tungsten rods at nearly the speed of light. The Concordat had never faced weapons like this. Their shields were designed to stop energy beams and plasma bolts, the civilized weapons of galactic warfare. They had no defense against chunks of metal moving so fast that they carried the force of nuclear bombs. The rods tore through shields like paper. They punched through hulls and out the other side, leaving ruin in their wake. 100 Concordat ships died in the first 30 seconds, their crews never even knowing what killed them. Al shouted for order, for formation, for return fire. But Daniel Carter didn't give him time to think. The human admiral had studied warfare his entire life. He knew that confusion was more deadly than any weapon, and he intended to keep his enemy confused. The Resolute led a strike force directly at the heart of the Concordat fleet. Smaller ships swarmed around the capital vessels, too fast to target, too small to catch. They planted explosives on hulls and disappeared before they could be destroyed. And then Commander Torres arrived with the sleeper fleet. The ancient warships rose from the void like ghosts from humanity's darkest memories. They were ugly and brutal, covered in weapons that no civilized species would ever build. They fired missiles tipped with antimatter. They deployed drone swarms that adapted and learned, finding weaknesses in enemy defenses and exploiting them without mercy. The Concordat officers had never seen anything like it. These weapons were barbaric, primitive, impossible. How could any species build such things? They did not understand that humanity had spent thousands of years learning to kill each other. They did not understand that peace was new to Earth, but war was very, very old. The battle raged for hours. Al his forces, using superior numbers to overwhelm human positions. For every ship humanity destroyed, the Concordat lost 5, but they had ships to spare. Slowly, inevitably, the tide began to turn. Daniel Carter watched his fleet being ground down and knew he could not win here. That was never the plan. The plan was to bleed them, to hurt them, to draw them deeper into the trap. "All ships begin retreat toward Earth," he ordered. "Make them follow." The human fleet fell back, fighting every step of the way. Al pursued, drunk on what he thought was victory. He had lost 800 ships, more than in any battle he had ever fought. But the humans had lost more as a percentage of their force. He was winning. He did not stop to wonder why the humans were leading him toward there instead of away from it. He did not question why they fought so hard and then gave ground so easily. He saw only a wounded enemy retreating toward a final desperate stand. That was exactly what Daniel Carter wanted him to see. On Earth, Doctor watched the battle reports with cold focus. Her team had finished final preparations on Project Prometheus. The weapon was ready. The calculations were complete. They only needed the Concordat fleet to move into position. "They're coming," she said to Laura Mitchell, "right where we need them." Laura nodded slowly. She had received word that Admiral Carter was wounded. His ship had taken heavy damage in the fighting at Jupiter, but he refused to leave the bridge, refused to stop fighting. He was buying time with blood. "How much longer?" Laura asked. 12 hours. They need to be deeper in the system before we can cut off their retreat. 12 hours. 12 hours of watching good people die so that Prometheus could work. 12 hours of sending soldiers into a battle they couldn't win just to delay the enemy's advance. Laura closed her eyes. Leadership meant making decisions that cost lives. She had known that when she took this job, but knowing it and living it were very different things. "Send word to Admiral Carter," she said quietly. "Hold them, whatever it takes, hold them." In the void between Jupiter and Mars, Daniel Carter received the message. He looked at his damaged ship, his exhausted crew, his shrinking fleet. He thought about his wife who had died 5 years ago. He thought about his children, safe on a colony world far from here. Then he turned back to where the Concordat Armada filled the stars. "You heard her," he said to his bridge crew. "We hold. Not one more step toward Earth until Doctor is ready." The young communications officer, Kelly, looked up at him with fear in her eyes. "Sir, can we really do this?" Daniel smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was real. "Humanity has been fighting impossible odds since we came down from the trees. This is just one more battle, and I'll tell you a secret. He leaned closer. They've never faced anything like us. They think they're winning because they don't understand what winning costs when you're fighting humans. We'll teach them. He straightened up and gave the command. All ships turn and engage. Let's show them how we die. The fleet turned. The battle resumed. And in the laboratories of Earth, the countdown to Prometheus continued. The Earth hung in the like a blue and white jewel, beautiful and fragile against the endless black. Admiral Al looked at it and felt nothing but contempt. He had lost over 2,000 ships reaching this point. 2,000 vessels destroyed by a species that should have surrendered at the first sign of Concordat might. The humans had fought like animals, throwing themselves into battles they could not win, dying by the thousands just to slow his advance. It disgusted him. It offended everything he believed about order and civilization. These creatures were savages, and the galaxy would be better once they were corrected. But now it was over. The human fleet was shattered. Only a few hundred ships remained, gathered in a desperate defensive line between his armada and their. They were brave, he had to admit. Foolishly, pointlessly brave. Al opened a communication channel to all surviving human forces. Your defiance has been noted and will be remembered, he broadcast. Your children's children will be taught to weep at the memory of this day, but the time for fighting is over. Surrender now, and your correction will be merciful. Continue to resist, and I will burn your cities one by one until nothing remains but ash and screaming. He waited for the response. In his long career, he had delivered this ultimatum many times. Sometimes they surrendered. Sometimes they tried one final attack. But always, the terror in their voices told him he had won. The response came from a gray-haired human woman. Her face was lined with exhaustion, but her eyes burned with something Al could not understand. You first, Laura Mitchell said. And then every jump gate in the galaxy went dark. Doctor had worked on Project Prometheus for 15 years. She understood the mathematics of spacetime better than almost anyone alive, and she knew that the jump gate network was not just a transportation system. It was a cage, a leash, a chain that kept the galaxy under Concordat control. She also knew exactly how to break it. The pulse that erupted from the hidden station near Earth's moon traveled faster than light. It moved through dimensions that humanity barely understood, following the quantum links that connected jump gate to jump gate across thousands of light years. And everywhere it touched, the gates collapsed. Not destroyed, not damaged beyond repair, simply turned off, their ancient systems overwhelmed by a signal they were never designed to receive. In the space of 10 seconds, the Concordat Armada went from the leading edge of an unstoppable galactic empire to a single isolated fleet, cut off from reinforcement, resupply, and retreat. They were trapped in an alien solar system with the survivors of a very angry species. Al felt cold fear for the first time in centuries. He tried to contact the Nexus, tried to reach any other Concordat force. Nothing. Silence on every channel. What have you done? He whispered. Laura's face reappeared on his. She was smiling now, a thin and terrible smile. We invited you in, she said. Now you can't leave. Daniel Carter had been waiting for this moment. His ship was dying, half its systems destroyed, a third of its crew dead. But he was still alive and his weapons still worked. All units, he said, his voice rough with pain and smoke. Attack. The human fleet surged forward. They were outnumbered and outmatched in every way that should have mattered. But they weren't fighting for victory anymore. They were fighting for survival and for revenge. Commander Torres led the sleeper fleet in a devastating charge at the heart of the Concordat formation. The ancient ships deployed weapons that had been designed to end human civilization centuries ago. Now they served a different purpose. They carved through alien vessels with savage efficiency, their automated systems finding weaknesses and exploiting them without hesitation or mercy. On Earth's surface, the planetary defense batteries awakened. They had been built in secret, hidden beneath mountains and oceans, dismissed by Concordat observers as primitive ceremonial installations. Now they revealed their true nature. Particle beams powerful enough to crack moons lanced upward, cutting through the invasion fleet. And Gray's final gift activated. The virus she had planted in the Concordat's targeting system spread like fire. Ships fired at empty space. Missiles veered into friendly vessels. Defensive systems shut down at critical moments. The disciplined Concordat formation fell into chaos as their own technology turned against them. Al screamed orders, but no one was listening anymore. His fleet was dying around him, torn apart by an enemy that should have been helpless. He watched his magnificent armada become a graveyard, and he could not understand how this was possible. The battle lasted 3 days. 3 days of constant fighting, of ships burning in Earth's skis, of soldiers dying in the cold vacuum. Human cities evacuated as debris rained down from orbit. Millions huddled in shelters, listening to the thunder of a war that would decide the fate of their species. Daniel Carter died on the 2nd day. His ship, the Resolute, placed itself between a crippled civilian transport and a Concordat battle cruiser. The cruiser's weapons tore the Resolute apart, but the transport escaped. Kelly, the young communications officer, survived. She was pulled from the wreckage by a rescue shuttle and taken to a hospital on Luna. She would later say that the Admiral's last words were quiet and simple. "Tell them we held, tell them we didn't kneel." On the 3rd day it ended. The Concordat Armada was broken. Of 10,000 ships, fewer than 300 remained operational. Admiral Al's flagship drifted powerless, its engines destroyed, its weapons silent. Commander Torres led the boarding party himself. They found Al on his bridge, surrounded by the bodies of his crew. The Crystal Admiral had not tried to flee or hide. He stood waiting, his ancient eyes watching the human soldiers approach. "You have won," he said. The words seemed to pain him. "I did not believe it possible. Your kind should have been dust beneath our feet." Torres looked at him for a long moment. Then he did something the Admiral did not expect. He lowered his weapon. "Admiral Al," Torres said formally, "you are a prisoner of the United Earth government. You will be treated according to the laws of war. No harm will come to you." Al's crystal face shifted in confusion. "Why? We would have erased everything you are. We would have corrected your species into oblivion. Why show mercy to us?" Torres thought about the reports from Gray. He thought about the 18 species who had been rewritten, their souls erased. He thought about what the Concordat would have done to humanity. "Because," he said slowly, "we're not you." The sky above Earth was full of burning ships and falling stars. The ocean was scattered with debris. Cities had been damaged, millions displaced, thousands dead. Humanity had paid a terrible price for its defiance. But they had won. Doctor stood at the window of her laboratory on Titan Station, watching the reports come in from across the galaxy. The jump gates were slowly coming back online. Already, transmissions were arriving from Concordat worlds, demanding explanations, making threats, begging for information. The galaxy had changed in a single night. The power that had dominated known space for 12,000 years had been broken by a species that had only left its 3 centuries ago. Thought about what came next. The war wasn't over. The Concordat still had vast fleets, still controlled hundreds of worlds. They would rebuild, recover, and come again. But now they knew. Now everyone knew. Humanity did not kneel. Humanity did not submit. And humanity could hurt them in ways they had never imagined. The stars were still burning outside her window, but for the first time in days, allowed herself to hope. The hard part was over. Now came the harder part, deciding what kind of galaxy humanity would help build from the ashes. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Humanity had defeated the Concordat. Not just fought them, not just survived them, but shattered the greatest armada ever assembled and captured its commanding admiral. The species that the elder races had dismissed as primitive savages had done the impossible. On 1,000 worlds, beings of every shape and form watched the broadcasts in stunned silence. The hegemony of had ruled for 12. They had corrected any species that dared to challenge the order they had built. They had seemed eternal, unchangeable, inevitable. Now their fleet was wreckage floating in human space. Now their prisoners sat in human cells. Now everything they had built trembled on the edge of collapse. And the galaxy waited to see what humanity would do next. Laura Mitchell had not slept in 4 days. Her eyes were red, her hands trembled with exhaustion, and the weight of impossible decisions pressed down on her shoulders. The War Council had been arguing for hours about how to proceed. Some wanted revenge. The Concordat had come to erase humanity. Justice demanded that humanity respond in kind, destroy their gates permanently, cut their worlds off from each other, let them starve and struggle in isolation until they learned to fear the species they had tried to correct. Others wanted safety. Use the Prometheus technology to build an impenetrable barrier around human space. Let the galaxy burn while humanity hid behind walls of collapsed spacetime. Never again would they be threatened by alien powers. Laura listened to all of them. Then she made a decision that would echo through history. "We're going to give it back," she said. The room fell silent. Cole, still grieving the death of Admiral Carter, stared at her in disbelief. "Give what back?" he asked. "The gates, the technology, everything." Laura stood and walked to the window, looking out at the sky of Earth. "We won because we fought together. We survived because we refused to abandon each other. If we respond to cruelty with cruelty, we become what we fought against. I won't let that happen." "They would have destroyed us," said. "They've destroyed 18 other species. And that's exactly why we can't do the same." Laura turned back to face the council. Those 18 species didn't choose to be corrected. They were victims, not enemies. And somewhere out there, the descendants of those species are living in a fog, not even knowing what was taken from them. We have the records recovered. We have their genetic histories. We could help them remember who they were. Doctor looked up from her data pad. "It's possible," she said slowly. "The corrections were genetic, but they weren't permanent in the way the Concordat believed. With the original templates, we could offer restoration. We couldn't force it, but we could give them the choice." Laura nodded. "That's what we're going to do. We're going to restore the gates. We're going to share what we know. And we're going to offer the galaxy something it hasn't had in 12,000 years, real freedom." The announcement went out the next day. Secretary General Mitchell addressed the galaxy from the steps of the old United Nations building in New York, rebuilt after the battle. Behind her stood representatives from every human colony world. Around the world, billions watched. "To the civilizations of the Galactic Concordat," she said, "humanity did not seek this war. We did not want to fight. But when given the choice between freedom and submission, we chose freedom. We will always choose freedom." She paused, letting her words carry across light years. "But we did not fight to become tyrants. We fought to survive, and we succeeded. Now we must decide what kind of galaxy we want to live in. We choose to build something better. The Jump Gate network is being restored. No tolls, no restrictions, open travel for any peaceful species. The hegemony's control over movement and trade is ended." A murmur ran through the watching galaxy. This was not conquest. This was liberation. "To the 18 corrected species, we offer something more. We have preserved records of who you were before the Concordat changed you. If you wish to remember, if you wish to restore what was taken, we will help. The choice is yours." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within days, delegations from dozens of worlds arrived at Earth, asking questions, offering thanks, seeking the truth about what had happened. Some came with hostility, convinced this was a trick. Others came with desperate hope. Gray, now serving as Earth's ambassador to the former Concordat, met with representatives of the. They were a quiet people now, gentle and obedient, their eyes empty of the fire that had once made them famous. But when she showed them recordings of their ancestors, showed them the poetry and songs they had created, something flickered in those empty eyes. "We made that," one of them whispered. "We were that." "You could be again," said gently, "if you want." The representative was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, tears began to fall from eyes that had forgotten how to cry. "Yes," he said, "we want." The restoration process took years. Not all the corrected species chose to change. Some had built new identities, new cultures, and didn't want to go back. Humanity respected those choices. Freedom meant freedom for everyone, even the freedom to stay as they were. But many chose restoration, and slowly the galaxy began to change. Admiral Al waited in his cell for judgment. He expected death, or worse. What he got instead was a visit from Secretary General Mitchell herself. She sat across from him, this small human woman who had an empire. He studied her face, looking for triumph or cruelty. He found neither. "I have a question," she said. "One question, and then you'll be released to a neutral world where you can live out your days in peace." Al's crystal face shifted. "Released? I led the fleet that attacked your world. My orders would have erased your species, and you would simply let me go." "Yes." "Why?" Laura smiled. It was not a cruel smile. "That's supposed to be my question, but I'll answer yours first. We're letting you go because keeping you changes nothing. Executing you helps no one. And the galaxy needs to see that humanity can win without becoming monsters." Al considered this. In his long life he had never encountered such thinking. The strong ruled. The weak submitted. That was the natural order of things. These humans had proven themselves strong beyond imagination, yet they chose not to rule. "Your question," he said finally. "Why didn't you just leave us alone?" Laura asked. "We weren't threatening anyone. We just wanted to live our lives among the stars. Why was that so dangerous?" The old admiral was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was soft with something that might have been regret. "Because you are everything we feared. You create and destroy with equal passion. You love and hate with the same intensity. You are chaos walking, unpredictable and uncontrollable. The Concordat was built to prevent species like you from rising. We did not attack because you threatened us. We attacked because you threatened everything we believed about the universe. And now I believe we were wrong." His crystal face shifted into something that resembled peace. "Perhaps the universe needs a little chaos. Perhaps order without freedom is just a different kind of death." He rose to leave, pausing at the door. "The galaxy will never be the same because of your kind. Whether that is a blessing or a curse remains to be seen, but I think, perhaps, it will be a blessing." Years passed. The hegemony of collapsed, replaced by a loose confederation of independent worlds. Some former Concordat species joined humanity's new alliance. Others kept their distance, watching and waiting to see what these strange humans would do next. Commander Torres, now admiral of the combined fleet, stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned Daniel Carter. The great ship orbited Jupiter Station, where a memorial had been built to honor those who died in the battle. Every name was etched in stone, from the highest admiral to the youngest ensign. Doctor was there too, reviewing data from the restored civilizations. They had begun singing again, their new songs mixing ancient traditions with fresh hope. They had launched their first exploration mission in centuries, their ships venturing into the unknown with wonder in their hearts. A communication came through from Gray on the other side of the galaxy. "They're asking to join us," she said. Her voice carried a note of amazement. "Not as subjects, not as allies, as partners. They want to build something together." Smiled. He thought about Admiral Carter, about all the people who had given their lives so humanity could reach this moment. They had fought for survival. They had found something greater. "Tell them yes," he said. "Tell them humanity is ready." Outside the stars blazed in their eternal dance. They had seen empires rise and fall, species bloom and wither, wars that burned across light years. And now they watched something new being born. The galaxy had ordered Earth to kneel. Earth had answered with fire. And from the ashes, something beautiful was rising. The memorial at Jupiter Station bore a simple inscription, chosen by the survivors of that terrible battle. It read, "We came from Earth. We carried fire. We chose to share its warmth instead of its wrath." Far away, on a restored world where they sang songs that had been silent for centuries, a child looked up at the stars and wondered what adventures waited out there. The universe was vast and full of danger and mystery, but for the first time in 12,000 years, it was also full of hope. And that made all the difference.